Right, okay, you may have noticed a slight pause just then. We're having to splice two videos together because we've gone over 15 minutes. Right, so let's continue. So the next slide is setting. Now, as we've already mentioned, setting is very important. Now, I've put a quote here for you, Edinburgh. It was windy. And he talks about how they went up to Arthur's Seat, as you've already mentioned, Miss, on a windy Edinburgh day. And the thing that he noticed is that because her hair was covered, she looked neat, slightly apart from everyone else. Now, I think if we read between the lines there, what could that suggest being slightly apart?
I think, well, I mean, my interpretation, I think it's that everybody that's up there feels the wind in their hair and feels their clothes being blown open, their coat blown open, or, you know, and it's that kind of being up there, the wind is part of it, and he feels different because it's not happening to her.
Yeah,
perhaps.
but which again, could that reflect the difference within
in their cultures?
Culture,
yeah, it does.
Religion, etc.
Yeah,
different. Again, we have this one.
Yeah, we mentioned this earlier. It's right from the very beginning of the story about the bone-coloured sky, a purity in the desert air, the bareness, and it's flat and it looks very barren and very well, this coloured, bone-coloured sky.
Very vivid images.
Yes, it
isn't
is.
It really sets the scene. And also, I think something else I didn't link in before. We talked about the Nile. Interesting that we have the Nile calf in Edinburgh. We've got
yes,
a link
it is.
between
Yes,
the two
the link
settings,
between the
haven't
two.
we?
She
Nile
might
calf.
have gone to work there to, you know, get the job
Yeah.
there, thinking it would be a reminder of home.
It probably, yeah. So it's a link between the two. But really, look for what is the meaning. These two places, Edinburgh and Khartoum, do they reflect these two different people, different aspects? Think about that. Okay. Themes, Miss.
Yep, themes. I think we've talked about quite a few of these already. The religion, the crossing of boundaries between the religions, the social order, the power. I mean, it's clear that when the uncle dies, the men are kept separate to the women, and she is kept apart from him, isn't she, as well?
They have no contact, do they?
No contact at all. So the social order is that it's, you know, the men run things, and the women, you know, they do their jobs. Like when the uncle dies, they are the ones there preparing him to be buried. So lots of differences between culture and tradition. We have the gender differences, and we have the arranged marriage theme as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things to remember is that throughout it, I don't know what you think, Miss, but it almost seems like although he's adopted this culture and this tradition, it doesn't quite sit well with him.
No.
There's a feeling of uneasiness, especially when we talk about the exchanging of money with the brother.
Yes.
Okay, he talks about how he was on a street corner. Again, thinking about linking that to perhaps, you know, I'm going to say it, prostitution, things like that. I'm not saying that she is,
No.
but because of where he's been brought up, the background he belongs to, paying for something in such a way, you know, it makes him think of other things. It does not sit well with him.
Yeah, he is referred to, even at the end, when the brother says you can get married in my flat to them, he still refers to him as the foreigner.
Yeah.
Even though he prays and he's adopted the Islam and he prays to Mecca, he's still a foreigner.
Yeah. They test
And I
him.
think-
They get
yeah,
him to
they
say
do.
a prayer. And
Yes,
go,
they do.
You know,
Yeah.
are you really?
But the brother
one of us?
starts to help him then,
Yes.
doesn't he? So there is a bit.
But has he got ulterior motives?
That's it. You
Yeah.
have to kind of make your own interpretations.
And again, of arranged marriage, it was described. She wasn't even there at the signing of the contract. It was the men in one room,
Yes,
the women in another
yes.
room. It's this arranged. It's different. The social order, the
It's
power,
like a
it all
business
links
deal.
in. Yeah,
It's like a business deal, isn't it?
Definitely.
She's yours now. You take her.
Yeah.
It's that kind of idea. Yeah.
Oh, and we didn't put here expectations. And I think, as we were just mentioning, he didn't realise exactly what was going to hit him in the face when he walked off that plane.
No, that's right. Expectations quite important. Then they haven't. Maybe it's not lived up to his expectations.
And also roles within marriage. And he's perhaps not used to this kind of the signing of the contract, the handing over the money, role of the woman.
We'll look at something in the end,
Yeah.
because that very ending, and we talked about this earlier, the very ending, we won't jump there now, but they seem to fall into expected
Yeah.
roles of them,
Yeah.
don't they?
Brilliant. So really think about what is being applied with this story. Okay. So the writer's techniques. A new slide. It's a new slide.
Yes.
Okay. So Miss, we thought this
Excuse me.
was worth really looking in detail because it is a long story, but it's full of lots of different techniques.
It is, and I want to mention this rule of 3 that writers often use. And there's an example here, that side of him that was theoretical, intangible, belonging to the spiritual world. We call it the rule of 3, and she does it quite a lot. And I started marking them. I'm not going to read them all out here to you, but if you, as you're reading again, if you look for this rule of 3, there is a really easy one to tell you, but I can't
Is it that
find
blood,
it.
the
It
Nile,
is.
the
It's,
blood, bones?
blood.
of it?
Where was it?
The Nile. Here we go. Blood, death, bones. Line 50. Blood,
Okay.
death, bones. Have you heard of that? 3 is a magic number. Well,
Yeah,
I think there's
it's how we remember things, isn't
in
it? As well, if
threes.
you know. So where was it, Miss? What line was it?
50.
Yes, he could picture an accident. Blood, death, bones.
Yeah.
The rule of 3. There are lots of groups of words as well.
Yeah. Ties in with the punctuation we mentioned earlier.
It does,
The
and
list of things, the busyness of the words, the short. We've got lots of short sentences. I think we talk about this a bit later on. It builds up the atmosphere, doesn't it?
It does, and there's even she's done it like times 6 in one point. So she's doubled up her rule of 3.
Yeah.
So look for that as you're reading.
Yeah.
Sentence structure and punctuation.
Just
Miss has
talked
just
about
said, yeah, there's an example for you on
Voices,
line 32.
noises, car horns. Yeah, again, it's emphasising how busy it is.
Yeah.
Good. Descriptive language.
Lots of personification and use of metaphor. The questions that had tilted the walls around him and nearly smothered him. So you've got this mix of personification and metaphor.
Yeah.
The word, interestingly, the word tilted is used twice in the story. I think it's used towards the end as well.
Yeah, so remember that's personification there with the whole giving it human characteristics. And if you want an example of a metaphor, we have at the beginning the bone-coloured sky. Okay, so there's
Yeah.
some examples for you.
Yeah, good.
And then we have withholds information.
Now this is an interesting one. To keep us reading, she doesn't want to reveal everything straight away. So it's done in sections. For example, no, he doesn't mean to be unfriendly. You'll see, leaving the reader guessing, well, what am I going to see?
Yeah.
This is a reference to her brother, and it makes us curious.
Yeah.
And it is a literary device where writers withhold the information, and
Yeah.
it's to keep us hooked, to keep us... It's also to make us think about the possibilities of what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at this beginning. We don't even know their names. The man, the woman. It's leading us in. He's just stepping off this plane. Where is he? What's
Yeah.
going on? The country just stirred him. It's all this technique withholding information, making us read on.
So remember, if you're writing in the exam that the writer withholds information, don't just leave it at that. You have to say why.
Yeah,
And
and the
I say all the
effect.
time, it's all about the how and the why, and that's what you need
Yeah,
to look at.
good. Okay, so structure. Now this is quite interesting. So we've got to think about, does the story follow a traditional structure? And how does the structure relate to the meaning? Now we know that they use flashbacks within the story. Okay, we go between Khartoum and Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a point on line 270, mid-morning in Gam Huraya Street, which
Yeah.
could almost be, you know, where is that? Is that in Khartoum or is that in Edinburgh? And when I reread this story last
Yeah.
night, ready for doing this, I had to really think about where that was.
Yeah. So we do have this mix
You
of
need,
place.
yes, you
yeah.
need to kind of see where the each section is.
Yeah, I know. If we think about our traditional story structure, the denouement, so the introduction is where we learn about characters and setting. Now, right at the beginning, we're in the Sudan and we do learn about the setting, but it is not until we flash back until Edinburgh that we learn a bit about the character. And I think almost all the way up until the climax, we have this split story
Yes,
going on.
split
So
narrative kind of
split.
almost
So we
going
have
through.
the Edinburgh and we have the Sudan, and it moves on, and it's a split rising action of what's going on in Edinburgh and what's going on in the Sudan. And it's not until the climax, it's not until the wedding and the coming together of these two people around there that we actually just have one sort of narrative there. We're only in one place. Okay, so all the way through we have this split place until the wedding, and they come together. And if we think about back to what can the setting convey about meaning, again, the coming together of these two people, these two cultures,
Yes.
these two places.
Yes, and I just want to mention this coming together of these two cultures. At the bottom of page 45, I think the story darkens in this section here, because he's referring to his parents being worried about him, and talking about a neighbour, the neighbour's son who hanged himself, drugs of course, and days without showering. And it's this secret plague that targeted young men. And here we've got this kind of real reference to unemployment, drugs, depression, the underworld that throbbed and dragged itself parallel to their active middle class life. So this is where our kind of the way people live comes into it. And I think that's a really dark section of the story, actually.
I think it exposes him, exposes him as a quite a vulnerable young man, and he was clearly searching for answers.
That's right. I've got to just say, we've just had flash onto our computer screen here that our computers were about to close down. The technicians in school closed them down at a certain time. So that quickly, we've got to keep it going. Nothing to do with the story. Okay.
So I think he's quite a vulnerable young man, and he was searching for answers, and he found religion, this new religion. He became a Muslim. And obviously he's come across, he felt probably quite vulnerable when he was in this new cultural new place.
Do you think
kind of a bit
Missy's
lost.
had a bit of a breakdown at some point in his life? I mean, the words loser and failure and things like that were referred to him earlier on in the story. So he's changed himself. It's like he's reinvented himself, and he's embraced Islam. And I think he wants a Muslim wife now to complete this change in him.
But then even so he's feeling more confident, he's becoming one of the family, he's accepted, he marries the woman, but right at the end he says, feel sorry for me. So do you think he actually wants to lose this vulnerability, this,
I don't know. That's an interesting point, actually, because at the end of the very end of the story, where he said without thinking, it's been rough for me these past days, please feel sorry for me. When I first read that, I thought, why is he being weak? Why?
I know,
it
it's
sounds
supposed
like
to
a
be quite a
weakness.
tender moment they're sharing together, but he's made it about himself.
Yes, and she says, I do, she whispered, I do, which of course is the, in the marriage service here, which is completely different to how they marry. That's like her saying, I do.
I do.
I think she's fallen into the place as his wife. And has he fallen into the place of the male?
Of her culture.
Because his life now has got to be that he's got to be with the men when something happens, where there is, if somebody dies again, he knows his role now. He's got to go with the men. And so it's very, I wasn't sure about the ending of this story, because I think it can be interpreted in different ways.
But again, really worth focusing on is this repetition at the end of I do, which again, a very Western, when we say Western, I do, cultural wedding thing.
Do you like these two characters when you read this story?
I don't think reading the story at any point I felt any sort of I wasn't drawn to either of them. It was I was more interested in the place and the situation.
I think I was in the beginning hearing about his life and how he wanted to be a doctor, but he failed. And he's everyone, he had this loser and failure and didn't make it through medical school. I wondered if we were meant to empathise with him there, and I did, I suppose, a little bit, but then that soon went.
I don't know if it's because you kind of felt like he should know what's going on, and because it almost felt like he was being led through into this new culture, and like he was, I don't know, like a lost lamb somewhere.
Yes,
and he kind of think,
the
wise up a bit.
He met the teacher who has introduced him and changed him. Should we move on a little bit here?
Anyway, we're running out of. But again, we're going to leave you with a exam-style question. So, how is setting presented in Something Old, Something New? You need to write about what the setting is like and how the characters respond to it, and how Abu Layla uses the setting to reinforce the ideas in a story. Now, we should have given you lots of ideas for this. Think about all the techniques, the language, etc.
Yes, so have a go at answering the question. Get in touch with us and leave
Yeah.
comments. Are you actually sitting down when you viewed this, and are you doing some writing from it? What you know, we're not saying that's what you have to do,
Yeah.
but it's useful now. The exam's only
Yeah.
a few weeks away.
So watch out for our next videos on the poetry.
yeah,
And yeah, happy revising, everyone.
yes, keep up the good work. Revision will pay off in the end.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.